You're listening to Lighthouse Conversations, brought to you by Lighthouse Haven, a spiritual home for your awakening soul. Lighthouse Conversations is a show where awakening souls gather to be inspired, connected, and enlightened. Spiritual spark plug and host Chelly Canales, that's me, will guide you through the twists and turns of your journey to a safe haven where you are finally free to live your best light. Each episode contains a conversation with a guest who has gone through a spiritual awakening, detailing their unique and life-changing experiences in an intimate and candid way. Although everyone's experience is as unique as they are, we all share one common thread. We're all seeking something. So, come join us on this journey and be prepared to leave with resources that will supercharge you into inspired action. Here's today's episode. Hey guys, I'm so glad you found us here at Lighthouse Conversations. I want to introduce you to Chris Ward. He is an amazing advocate for justice, for women's empowerment, for spirituality, and all around people in need. And really, that's just the beginning. He just walks the walk. He's one of the people where I see his heart, it's on his sleeve, and that's the way he lives his life. His actions match his intention, which is really incredible. I had a great talk with him. I hope you have a great time as well getting to know Chris Ward.
Thank you very much for having me.
So glad you're here. So you are a big part of the spiritual community in Denver, which is where we first met. I want to hear a little bit about your background. How did you get to the point where you're attending these kind of events and meeting people like me?
Well, it was a transition, and it was quite a growth process, I believe, because prior to my professional life, I was in the Army. So I served happily for 11 years in the U.S. Army. I had traveled all over the world, and through that, you develop a lot of bad habits and all spiritually as well. And that was one of the things that I recognized was my philosophies, my lack of faith in humanity, pretty much, because a lot of my experience in the Army, I spent 2.5 years in Bosnia after the war. And so when I got out of that, I kind of realized, as opposed to the kind of the army of occupation that the U.S. has typically been associated with, I recognized the fact that we definitely needed to switch that out with being more pro-peace as opposed to pro-war. And so that kind of started leading me on the path. When you start reading Gandhi and Martin Luther King, then the other philosophies and spiritual beliefs kind of get associated with that as well.
I can see how that would be life-changing. You saw some things that I'm sure challenged you, and did you ever wonder, like, what is my place in that? How do I show up in the world so that things like this don't have to be anymore? Or how can I, in my small way, make positive change in the world?
Absolutely, but I think the first time I did it was, there was a night, I was very naive, because when I was in Bosnia, my first time I was there was 20 years old. I turned 21 in Bosnia back in 97. And one of the things that I thought was, because during the Balkan War was when I was in high school. And so when I met other people that were my age, and I thought, I could never allow this to happen to another child again. Some of the horror stories that I heard. And however, when I started working and then of course spent 2.5 years there and realized that my personal effect on the global theater was almost nil, because at the same time during the Balkan War, we had what was going on in Rwanda in Africa.
Right.
And then fast forward, we looked at what had happened in Iraq during the second invasion, in Afghanistan, and Syria, and what's going on now in Yemen. And you feel like you are making zero impact in the world. And that really not only frustrated me, but like I mentioned before, I lost my faith in humanity as a whole. And I got so stressed out that it emotionally impacted me. I'd even, back in 2004, 2005, even bursted a blood vessel in my eye. So the photographs from that time period remind me of the stress that I was under. And I kind of let all that go, and when I realized that I only have control over what I have a direct impact on, and then, when you look at, I think it was a Robert Kennedy or a JFK maybe quote that talked about the ripple effect of the combination of all of our joint droplets, can overthrow, the largest walls of oppression just by doing our little piece. And so I don't get too worked up about how small of an impact. What I do is try to collaborate with people to make a larger impact as a whole, in particular in the community that I live in. So I don't worry too much about federal or geopolitical issues as much as I did 10, 15 years ago.
That's a fair point. I know I tend to get really overwhelmed when I see all the things going wrong, and it hurts, and I feel for humanity, and I just think to myself, well, how can you show up every day? How can you have this conversation with someone else who's making the change, and then we meet more people making the change, and more people making the change? How you show up every single day does have a profound impact, and that's how we shift the tide, right?
Absolutely.
Because we are in this, our generation, I think in particular, is waking up at a faster rate than any other generation before. People are left and right. Suddenly, it's like, I'm in the Matrix. You know, I watched that movie again the other day and it got me thinking. So it just reminds me of that, like that awareness that's happening. These structures that were in place and have been in place for so long are not working anymore. People are not able to be in alignment with them and just accept them as fact. We have the power to change that. And it's step by step, bit by bit. And I'm so glad you're doing the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
And I love having this conversation with you because I can talk, I talk with women about this all the time. And there's a wonderful like rise in the divine feminine energy that's happening. Women are stepping into their power, using their voice. But I absolutely love it when a strong, you know, a man who's been through it, right? You're not just, how do I say this? It's not like you've always been woo-woo 100% your whole life. Like, I love that stuff. Not everybody just naturally is gravitated towards that. You have been through war. You have seen it. You have done it. And yet you show up in this incredibly spiritual way and also supportive of everyone around you, men and women, who are coming up into their own as well. Can you talk a little bit about being... would you say you're a minority in that right now and that it's shifting?
No, there's definitely a shift. And the first mention that you made about the fact that we're connecting a global community of people that are feeling the shift in consciousness that, you know, I've just in the last handful of years been connected with people all around the globe that I wouldn't have otherwise met. But somehow the universe brought us together, collaborating on a project right now in Puerto Rico because of that.
Nice.
And so I definitely see it, and I think that a lot of what I can attribute to the depression and anxiety that's been built up is the fact that I think that in our DNA we know that we're not living the lives that we were supposed to, and it's just kind of ingrained in us. And so as we shift and we connect, then we can grow strength, because it does, a lot of our philosophies counter what we've been taught all growing up, whether it's the economic system, where it's our politics, the humanity, our social welfare, all of that has been, we're trying to contradict that. So if we don't do it in mass, we're going to get beat up by the mainstream media and the mass think tank. But as far as when it comes to the feminine strength in there's something I always recognized, and I grew up in the Catholic Church.
Me too.
And there was this hierarchy in the household. So they had God, man, woman, and then child. And I always took umbrage with that. I don't know why, as a kid, that I was always like, why are the man over the woman? And I see this in a lot of religious practices, where the man is the head of the household. The woman is always subservient to her husband. And I was always like, why has that got to be the case? And I always questioned it. And so becoming a feminist myself and recognizing that we need more powerful women in both politics and in the business community, stepping up and taking up leadership roles, because I think men, when you have only men, we've saw the devastation that the unfettered economic system, what it's done to the earth, predominantly led by men. I mean, our entire justice system, the entire economic system, everything was always created by white, slave-owning, land-owning Protestant men that kicked off our country in 1770s. And so it's been, we think of it as this is the greatest country in the world, but I can see the the destruction that's also caused. Millions of indigenous people that were killed at the very onslaught of our country. 400 years of slavery. The country was built on the backs of slaves. And now today, we're still fighting for equal rights, We're still fighting for indigenous people's rights. We're still fighting for civil rights in the 21st century, things that you don't think would be an issue today.
Still are, and rights are being taken away.
Oh, it's amazing.
Which is unbelievable to me, and I feel like when there's a system in place that's on its last legs, when it's, feeling the pressure of people not wanting it to exist anymore, that's when it gets ugly. That's when it really, all the junk starts to rise to the surface, and I think that's why we're seeing that a lot right now, because that's going to be abolished, guys. Like that, I'm going to make decisions for you. You're not going to be represented. Only a certain population is going to be represented. That's not how it's going to be anymore. And it's like, if you're not on board, you better get on board, because you're going to be left behind.
Exactly. And I think, and you can probably agree that the idea of feminism, a lot of people think that it means putting women above men.
It's not that, you
It's
guys.
not at all. And so it's just like, no, we're just sharing responsibility here. Iceland was the perfect example, was after they had the same economic banking crisis in 2007, 2008 that the United States did. But they threw all of their bankers in prison, and now every board of directors for every company has to be 50% women. It has to be by law. And the country is now run, basically by women. And so we've seen that Iceland, without even, if you've heard, their economic model has shifted. It's now very prosperous. It's a hot worldwide destination spot. I heard it's still expensive to live there, but they've done incredibly well bouncing back from bankruptcy to the type of prosperity that they're enjoying today.
Yeah, it's a good example. And no one is saying, take all men out of power. It's because the balance has been like this. This is just going to make all the difference. And if you're threatened by that, if that's something that's scary to you, I would just say examine why. What is it that makes you feel that way? Is it because it's always been that way? Well, that doesn't necessarily mean it's right. And I kind of want to write a book like, congratulations, you're a feminist, is what I want to call it, because do you think women should have equal rights as men? Like, congratulations, you're a feminist. Nobody's saying they hate men. No one is saying any of that. I've been called militant before, just the way I'm talking to you right now, for just being like passionate and saying this is something exciting and this is what I think as a woman. And well, maybe if you weren't so militant, I could hear you, baby. Oh no, Okay, get back to your old century, or ship up or shape out. You know what I'm saying? And if I think that's called tone policing, when you express passion about something that's maybe an injustice. Whether or not you're being aggressive or not. People take that as threatening. And so by saying, well, could you just be nice about it? Couldn't you just be civil about it? That's a way of keeping the oppressor in place. So if you don't speak out about it, if you are told to calm down about it, then your words go away and the power is gone. So it's been very effective in basically shutting people up.
Oh, absolutely. It's amazing, people that take umbrage with individuals that speak out for women's rights, that they think that if, you give them an inch, they take a mile. It's like, well, we want to, the reproductive rights, the right that, a woman could choose to have an abortion up to 24 weeks. That's federally. Virginia is the only state that exceeds into 25 months. But past that, it has to be a direct threat of life to the mother or the child.
Right.
And yet, people will still spread propaganda saying, well, they want to have abortions up to the day before the child's born. I'm like, nowhere in North America is that legal, and there's no, not only is it not legal, but nobody's promoting pro-abortion. I've not heard one pro-choice person say, we need more abortions.
Everybody just loves abortion.
Yeah,
Nobody
exactly.
loves abortion.
Oh, yeah, it's ridiculous.
It's interesting because I feel like pro-life should include the life of the person carrying the child.
Absolutely.
And I also wonder if you're going to be criminalized for having this abortion. I would like to know what responsibility the man will take. Will he also be thrown in jail? No? Oh, really? Because that would make sense. Actually, none of it makes sense.
Because of who created the justice system. I go back to who were the authors of the justice system.
Yep.
They'll never write laws that implicate themselves, just like politicians. They'll never approve campaign finance reform because they use that same corrupt system to get themselves into office.
Elected, right? So it's like, why would I bother changing that? No.
No reason.
Oh, okay. Now I'm getting riled up. I'm being too militant. I better tone it down, reel it in a little bit.
I was going to say something.
Thanks for letting me, vent in such a negative way. I want to know about your influences. Who lights you up? What positive influences in the world, whether it's people or works of art or literature, that you really connect with?
Uh, Lately, I've been a huge fan of Jason Silva, a philosopher and world traveler. I think he's of Guatemalan descent or Venezuelan descent.
Venezuelan. Oh yeah.
And but American as well. And so philosophically, he and I are just right on cue. I mean, we've never met in person, but I like to call him my brother. So
yes.
And I share a lot of his videos because they're very thought provoking on social media. Dr. Greg Braden, I'm a massive fan for. So I've seen him live and met him, and I've also read his books. So he's a big influence of mine. He recently passed at 100, I think he was 101 years old, was Jacques Fresco, an architect who led the Venus Project out of Florida. So he created this model for a resource, well, he didn't create the model for a resource-based economy, but he had a plan for adapting a resource-based economy into a global transition on how a sustainable living, essentially. Peter Joseph was one of the guys that I really listened to about how to develop the resource-based economy and what that's all about.
And I will put these links down below in the notes so that
I could go on for days because I have different coaches on different aspects of my life. So when I'm studying Instagram, I have I go to Lewis Howes and watch his training on Instagram. School of Greatness. If it's YouTube, I go to Sunny. If there's so many different aspects of my life that I go to a different person for all that. This is one of the key factors in personal development is who you surround yourself with. And if you can't have honest conversations with people, that doesn't mean that, I've never heard anything come out of your mouth that I disagree with. But what I'm saying is if we spend enough time together, we probably find areas that we don't agree with.
For sure. There's always...
But I'm not going to sacrifice a relationship. And I see a lot of this on social media where people are like, they hear one person say one thing they disagree with, and all of a sudden they ostracize that person. I'm like, you could agree on 99% of all other issues, and you're going to push away a potential friend. I've had people that have attacked me, and I said, if you and I sat down for a beer, we'd probably be great friends.
I agree.
But because of the way you're treating me as a stranger, I don't want to be your friend. So
I hear that, and it's about listening, and it's about being open to the fact that people have grown up differently. They have different experiences. Their DNA is different, their religions. We all come from different backgrounds, and I think the more we can recognize that we are all the same, we have our souls are just as valuable as each other's. That we all belong to the same source, and I think it's just when people see each other as other, that's where the problem begins. If you hurt someone or dehumanize them, then it's easier to murder them. It's easier to make policies that take rights away from them. So I think if there's anything by having these conversations, it's maybe creating empathy or creating awareness and saying hey, we're all brothers and sisters, and there's truly no reason to operate in this world thinking anyone else is other than you.
Oh, absolutely. That was two of the other people, Carl Sagan and Neil deGrasse Tyson, speak to the fact that regardless of what your beliefs are, we all come from the same source, and Carl Sagan even said we're all made of stardust.
Stardust, yeah.
Yeah. So I keep that in my mind all the time, that we're all brothers and sisters. We all come from the same source, regardless of what we inherently believe in ourselves as far as who our creator was, or if we had a creator, if we were just one big cosmic accident. Yeah. We don't know, but one thing we do know is we did come from the same source. That's irrefutable. So.
Yeah, we can't deny that. I think sometimes, though, this occurred to me when I was little, and I was looking at an ant farm, and they're doing their little job, and they're going up and down the hill. I'm like, what if we're somebody's ant farm? What if we're, this whole universe is sitting on somebody's table in somebody else's universe? There's so much out there that we just don't know. So I feel like I'm more inclined to be open to the crazier explanation, the one that seems like, well, that's not what we learned in school. Cool. Tell me more. I want to know about it. I choose to believe that we are spirits having a temporary physical experience. And so why are we here, right? That's the big question. What am I doing here? What am I doing here? I truly think that it's to help each other through the day. I think it's to each find that thing that we love to do, that lights up our heart, that we would do for free, right? But that thing is received and makes a difference, and it serves people. And so it's kind of that, I like to call it circle of light. It's put out, it's received, it comes back, and everybody benefits in that situation. When it comes to why are we here, what's the meaning of life? What's your quick answer to that?
Why are we here?
It's a small question.
The biggest question, I think, that we tend to ponder it is, why are we here? And I would have to say that it's just a continuation of life. I mean, the only way I've ever been able to define God is it is the composition of all life in the universe. You know, every living thing, plant, animal, Homo sapien, whatever species, whatever else is in the universe, all comprised together creates what I would consider God. And it was, I remember it was in kindergarten when this dawned on me, because they said, something to the effect of like, God is bigger than all things, and and He's got the whole world in His hand. I could never attract a masculine pronoun to God as he or she, so I always considered God as it. And so I thought my purpose, or our life's purpose, is to perpetuate itself, is to continue life. And so anything that hinders life, or hinders progress, or hinders evolving consciously, if you will, for the Homo sapiens, that's our purpose, is just to continue life, not to end it. And I think a lot of humanity takes steps to end human life. I tell people when they say we're going to save the earth, I'm like, no, you better save humanity, because the Homo sapiens are going to die long before Earth goes anywhere. So.
Wow, I've never heard it put that way. That was deep. That was great. It got me thinking. And I love that you were having these thoughts in kindergarten.
Yeah.
So have you always felt a little bit outside the box growing up?
I was always an alien.
Me too.
Yeah, I always was. I was pretty confident growing up that I was not from this planet.
I would watch other people and how they operated and the social constructs that were in place, and it just, none of it made sense to me. I learned how to operate in it. Like, okay, now I can make a lot of friends and all of that, but there were times when I was just like, I am on the wrong planet. Yeah. And so it's amazing that you had that awareness. Do you feel like growing up that you had any support in terms of like asking those questions, or material around you that was easily accessible, or is this something that you really had to go out and search for?
I think I had to search for it, because I wasn't always confident when I was sharing ideas with people, but I said it in such a way that that I acted like I knew the answer. Like you couldn't convince me otherwise that there wasn't life in the universe. Now, I've never seen a UFO, I've never seen an extraterrestrial, never been visited that I know of.
Yeah.
Who knows? But
they make you forget.
They make you forget, I've heard. And I've had times that I can't remember, but it had nothing to do with extraterrestrials. But when I shared, but I was confident in saying there's life in the universe. When I grew up on a farm, and I used to lay out, we didn't own the farm, but we rented the house on the farm. And so I used to lay out on the cornfields whenever they'd get mowed down, and I could lay down, I'd lay up and watch the stars. And your entire peripheral vision was all stars. And I don't even know how old I was. It was probably kindergarten age or under, where I would think that there was a boy laying on another planet doing the exact same thing, looking back at me. And this was before I had a concept that we even had other planets in our solar system. Wow. I just thought, well, if I'm here, there's got to be somebody over there looking back, and without any concept of how the solar system was even constructed, or where it was laid out. So you couldn't convince me otherwise that there wasn't life in the universe. I don't remember anybody ever making fun of me. And then when you get to be 6'5", nobody really questions you.
I know exactly what that's like.
When you're white, you're 6'5", and you're in a suit and tie, they're just like, whatever you say, man.
And when you're small and Latin and like 5 foot, they're like, isn't she cute?
No, but they know how dangerous short Latin women can be. So that's why.
And feisty, don't forget.
And feisty, that's right.
I was just picturing you on that cornfield, and then I could hear the soundtrack of Somewhere Out There, like having your own Fievel moment. Exactly. And you're just like, yes, someone else is.
But with the alien from Mac and Me on the other planet.
I like it. We got to make that movie. That's so cool. So where do you see this taking you? I mean, in your career, I want you to talk a little bit about what you do and how, if at all, this informs what you do for a living.
It is congruent. I think that's one of the benefits, is that to find professional purpose, a way to monetize what you're doing that's aligned with your passion. And one of the passions I've always had because of the military and being in countries all over the world to date where there is no legal recourse when you're taken advantage of, around the planet. Whatever happens to you, happens to you, whether you're taken advantage of by the government, by a large corporation, by a family member. I spend a lot of time in India, and if I needed to sue somebody in India, they joke, this is the joke, you will die of old age before you'll ever get justice on whatever you're taking them to court for. So they kind of just laugh if you threaten to sue them, because they're like, oh, you kidding? It'll be 40 years before you'll ever see a day in court.
That's so frustrating.
Yeah. So, and I see that at all levels. And you look at countries that, like Bosnia, where the country basically turned in against itself. There's no recourse, and there's no justice will ever come from that. And especially when I see in the indigenous peoples what happened, as far as all the treaties that the United States had made with the indigenous peoples, and every single treaty violated time after time after time with no legal recourse afterwards, because who are you going to go after? The government, And so what I do now is be able to give people affordable access to quality legal representation. Yep. So it levels the legal playing field, because in 250 years of our nation's history, nobody has ever known what it's like. So nobody tends to seek legal counsel because they know that the cost of the solution is going to be greater than the cost of the problem itself.
That is one way to get you to not sue, isn't it? So it's so great that there are resources out there that make it accessible, and doing something positive for others when you feel so helpless. When wrong has been done against you, you feel there should be something I can do about this, right? Well,
you would
it's
think.
Not always so easy.
Nope. Because that justice system was created by people that
Benefit
created it from themselves. Yeah.
Wow. Just if we could turn back time. I think it's fixable. That's my share moment.
It is. We have a fix. Yeah. MLK said, Martin Luther King said in his time that we have a solution to poverty. We have the knowledge and the whereabout to end poverty in one generation, but we just lack the willpower to do so. And it's because before you talk about poverty alleviation, you have to talk about greed alleviation.
Yeah.
And the current economic system, not current, the one that we've let bolster for hundreds of years, has now is no longer sustainable. It's a debt perpetuating machine, and it's ruining a lot of people's lives. And people want to defend it vehemently because that's all they've ever known. And so now we're going to start implementing systems. So I'm working on projects to develop sustainable houses that are affordable and high quality. I mean, the house we're going to build, it's created from industrial hemp. So it's a hempcrete home. We're doing it in Puerto Rico because we want to use it as a model to show what to build moving forwards, because Puerto Rico faces two big issues. We have the climate change and the sea level rising. So dreadful impact about all the coastal waters, which is going to impact about, they said, I can't remember what percentage, but it was like 80% of the population is going to be adversely impacted by a 1.6 foot rise in the sea level. Is going to impact that many people. You also have devastating storms like the Hurricane Maria that hit in 2017.
Still recovering.
It's only a matter of time before another hurricane of equal or greater power hits that island. So we are actually designing the home so it can withstand a Category 5 hurricane, and it's energy self-sustaining. It's a net zero energy home, so that if the grid gets cut off, as it did in 2017, that each property will be able to maintain independent water and electricity.
That's amazing. Yeah. When you say we, who's doing that?
Me.
He's doing that. He is doing that.
I have collaborators. I have collaborators all over the world that I'm working with now. So the architects are in India, the ones that are doing the blueprints right now. I've got people on the ground in Puerto Rico that are looking for properties. I've got engineers in London that I'm working with on this project as well. And so what we want to do is start it from a nano grid. So we're going to do one home, then build a community, what we call the macro grid, and then the micro grid, and then we're going to move up to a macro grid. So we have a design and plan for a city that we're going to build in Colorado called Canvas, Colorado. So keep your eyes open.
That is so cool.
20,000 people in a fully sustainable city.
Is there a place where people can follow updates on this process?
If you, it's also powered by Pinterest. So if you go to Pinterest, you can look up Canvas Colorado on Pinterest. If you Facebook search Canvas Colorado, you'll be able to join the online community there, share ideas, because the reason I've called it Canvas is because I want it to be designed by its inhabitants.
Wow, I love it.
You know, but the infrastructure, we start with the end in mind. So the population of 20,000, that infrastructure is going to be placed there for 20,000 at the beginning. So once you've exceeded that, we have to go elsewhere.
Okay.
So, but that's one of my projects.
So cool. I love this. Like you really walking the walk, talking the talk, you're doing it all. You have that spiritual mindset that has affected you personally, and so now you're taking it out into the world, and I think all of us can work towards that end as well. How can people get in touch with you? What website, what information can they have if they want to know more about everything that you do?
Oh, well, I'm on every social media outlet, so you can definitely find me on Instagram at Ward of the World, W-A-R-D of the World. On Facebook, just look up Chris Ward. If you want to learn more about our legal service plans and identity theft service plans, you can Google search Chris Ward LegalShield and then find me there.
Well, it was such a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for being on Lighthouse Conversations.
Thank you. It's such an honor to be with you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Lighthouse Conversations. If this show resonates with you, it would mean so much to have you rate, review, and share. Don't forget to follow us at chellycanales.com and on social media.